So we took the time to review my personal Ural gear up. And this one is a 2021, but essentially this review would classify for anything 2018 all the way to 2023 and most likely well beyond. So let's start with what the hell is a Ural? So a Ural is a motorcycle that came out of Russia out of need during the Second World War. In 1939, they licensed this design based off the M71 from BMW and just always kept it alive. That's why we have that opposing twin engine. If you picture a sidecar in a cartoon or anything, it's most likely this one that you're thinking of. So what they did is post-war, they actually started making this motorcycle available to the public in 1953. The Urals are known around the world to move people around and move cargo and just be basically tractors. That is why there's over 3 million Urals that have been sold worldwide to date. So enough with the history lessons. What do I think about the Ural? The drive of this, the first few hundred kilometers or first 100 miles if you're American, is absolutely sketchy. I am used to driving motorcycles, and this is unlike driving a motorcycle because it doesn't react the way that you would expect. When we're accelerating, it's gonna pull to the right. When we're braking with the rear brake, it's gonna pull to the right. If I'm braking with the front brake, it's gonna pull to the left. If I am making a left-hand turn, it's nice and steady. If I'm making a right-hand turn, the sidecar wants to come up on me and wants to kill me. And then when you finally relax into it, it's amazing. It's unlike anything else. There's definitely a learning curve to it, but once you relax into it, it's pretty fantastic. And the cool thing is, this is actually set up as a proper 3-seater. So I can have my wife in the sidecar, my daughter could sit behind me, and we could go for a family ride with the motorcycle, all 3 of us. And thanks to the tractor-like gearing that is in the 4-speed transmission, whether I'm alone or I'm fully loaded up, this thing seems to accelerate and have the same top speed all the way across. And that comes from Ural. In their actual specs, have a payload capacity of 1,325 pounds. I'm gonna let that sink in. 1,325 pounds payload on a motorcycle. That is crazy. That is much more than any Ford truck can put in the box, even their biggest F450. You could correct me on that, because it's like not at all, but I think it's funny to brag on Fords. That makes this bike pretty unique. And the 4-speed transmission, we should actually call it a 5-speed, but only 4 forward gears. And you did hear that right. This motorcycle has a reverse gear. If we need to back up or we need to push it or whatever we need to do, I can just kick that lever, which is actually on the right foot and completely weird. But when I'm in neutral, I can go in that reverse gear. Now your 4 forward gears are geared very low, very much so to use the grunt of this engine and to push us forward whether we're loaded or not. Top speed, it will depend on conditions. You are able to cruise at 100 kilometers an hour or 60 miles an hour fairly easily, but I have brought this to about 115 kilometers an hour, 120, which is about 70 miles an hour for you guys in the States. It'll do that very well, and it's kind of comfortable. The engine in this is very unique to a BMW design, so it is an opposed twin. So that is derived from radial engines. So our pistons are actually going opposite from each other, and they stick out on the side of the motorcycle. That is matted to a dry clutch. So in motorcycles, we usually have a wet clutch pack that is in the oil that engages and disengages the engine. On this motorcycle, it's a clutch like you would find on a car that is matted to the transmission with a drive shaft that you'd find on a car that runs that rear drive. The other cool thing with this engine, it actually runs an alternator, again, like you'd find in a car, not a traditional stator and rectifier like we find on almost all the other small engines. Now, if we're talking performance of this thing, the name of the game with the Urals is to be reliable and to move constantly. So they actually run a really low compression ratio of 8.6 to 1. So for everybody that's listening out there, your average motorcycle that is geared for performance is gonna run over 10 or sometimes 11 to 1 compression. This is very low, maybe good for boosting. another conversation, but it's good to produce 45 horsepower and 42 foot-pounds of torque. So on the size of the motorcycle, matted with the gearing, it does a really good job at moving itself around, which is 730 pounds. So there is a lot of itself to move around, and there's quite a bit of drag, as you can imagine, from that sidecar pulling us in and out. This specific model, the Gear Up, has a lever that I could engage from one-wheel drive, which drives the regular motorcycle wheel, and I can engage two-wheel drive, so I will drive the outside wheel of the sidecar as well. And that is really cool. So not all Urals will have that. All Gear Ups do though. And the conditions that you would want to drive the two-wheel drive is definitely loose surface. I tried it in the snow, and it was the difference between driving a truck and two-wheel drive and throwing it in 4x4. It felt the same on this bike. As soon as I put it in the two-wheel drive, I had tons of traction, versus in the single wheel, as you could expect, I was spinning. Are you gonna drive on dry pavement with it? No. Are you actually going to use it? 99% of us, no. It's a gimmick, but it's a cool gimmick, and you should care about it because it's a cool gimmick. The other thing in 2018 that made a lot of changes was the newest edition of their fuel injection system. So reliability has never gone hand in hand with Urals. That being said, post 2018, much better. The good thing with these motorcycles, they are meant to be simple. They're meant to be easy to work on. I've read many stories of guys literally changing a crank in the engine on the side of the road. So not just replacing the motor, pretty much doing open heart surgery on it and rebuilding the motor on the side of the road and got going again. That should be a testament of how easy these things are to run. The suspension on my bike in the front is a design that is said to be the most comfortable and the best handling for a bike with a sidecar, which is a counter lever suspension. So if you look at that front suspension, the fork tubes actually don't have shocks, and the shocks are mounted to what would be the equivalent of a swing arm in a car. We have that in this motorcycle. So that's pretty cool. Driving impressions of the bike, once you're relaxed, once you're eased into it, it's fantastic. It's tons of fun. When you have a passenger, it actually makes it easier to drive. It doesn't make it harder. So to learn, it's actually easier to learn with a passenger if you can find anybody that'll trust you enough. But once you're going and you're used to it, this is like driving anything else. It's no problem, and you could have tons of fun. There is a lot to keep in mind that this isn't naturally gonna do what you instinctively want it to do. There's always a little bit of an element where this bike is fighting you, where it's pulling kind of in different directions and not where you want it to go. But that's also all the charm about the bike, is that it is fighting you. It is evoking an emotion when you're riding it and when you're seen riding it. Like, this is the equivalent of being like Batman or Superman. You get tons of smiles, all the little kids wave at you, you stop at a gas station, everybody's asking you if you restored it. It's definitely a social thing as well. So if you buy a Ural, if you don't want to be hassled, make sure you get jerry cans and fill that thing at home, because there is no gas station that I went to that people didn't want to talk to me about it. But it's cool, it evokes that much emotion out of people. So if we're talking fuel efficiency for a motorcycle, it's actually kind of bad. In the States, you're rated about 63 miles per gallon. I could tell you I'm averaging closer to 8 liters per 100 kilometers, but I kind of drive it full throttle all the time. It's not the bike you should look at if you're looking for fuel efficiency, but you're also moving quite a bit more weight, you have quite a bit more capacity, and it's geared to be strong. So what are you expecting? You know, yeah, it's not a fucking Prius. So one thing with these Urals that has happened in the last 4 or 5 years, the pricing has definitely changed drastically. You used to be able to get some of these bikes in the mid-teens. If you want to get a new Gear Up today, if you're in the States, you're going to be spending above $22,000. And if you're in Canada, you're going to be spending above $27,000. That being said, I still find it's a bargain for what you have put together. In 2022, they actually moved out of Russia and they are made in Kazakhstan now. They have a space program. They must know what they're doing. Let's give them the benefit of the doubt. If we look at competition, what competition? No other motorcycle comes equipped from the factory with a sidecar. No other manufacturer has had this long of a history producing a motorcycle to be matted to a sidecar. So everything else is done in the aftermarket world. So this bike really stands alone if you're gonna compare it to anything. And if you are comparing a Ural to a Spider, you suck. This is not a Spider. This is way cooler than a Spider. If you're comparing the two, go buy a Spider, stop watching my reviews, and do not subscribe because you're weird. This is way cooler.